As you can see on the screen, you're looking at NeoLoad, Neodis's performance and load testing tool. What I'm going to show you today is a demo of NeoLoad. We're going to get into things like how we can realistically simulate real behavior, how we can look at network virtualization built into the tool, some of the mobile technologies, looking at the theme around NeoLoad's ability to deliver your automation faster with a more automated approach, which is going to help you in an agile methodology, as well as some of the latest in web technologies that we're supporting. So let me get into the demo. So NeoLoad is a GUI-based tool. There's no scripting language needed. It's pretty much a click and drag tool. You can see here it comes in a viewing as a tree structure. You have user paths here, which we're going to create some. These are essentially recordings, or in other terms could be referred to as a script. But in our case, since we're a scriptless based tool, I'll refer to them as user paths as best as I can. The tool itself is written in Java, so it's extremely scalable in terms of how you deploy it. It can be deployed on any of the major OSs, as well as the fact that it's what I call the one-stop shop. So it has all three components built into one simplified tool. So you're not having to load different applications to do things like Runtime, to actually run the tests, or separate tool to look and do analysis. Everything's built in here, and the flow within NeoLoad works quite well in terms of each and every component, which we'll see in this demo. So to start, I want to talk about the fact that what we're going to do is a recording first, and a recording against an application that we use here that's gone through several revs. In this particular case, we're looking at version 1 of this particular app. This app is a weather alert app that allows us to submit reports anywhere in the world in terms of crisis or weather related alerts. This particular build came with the ability to have a map, submit a report, get alerts, that type of thing. But a couple of things that aren't in here in reference to the next build that is released, let's say a week later, some more functionality around looking at reports. There's a new contact sheet that we can look at. So the goal of this demo is to kind of go through the flow of some of the fantastic options within NeoLoad, as well as understanding how NeoLoad can fit into this agile mode, where of course knowing that creating the scripts is one thing, but maintaining those over the life cycle of a development project can be tricky. With NeoLoad, it's extremely fast, easy, and a lot more automated than a lot of the tools out there. So let me get started. So back in NeoLoad, I'm going to go ahead and start a recording now. One of the nice things is when you start NeoLoad, you have the ability to open up a sample project or create new projects. I have opened up the sample project here, and one of the good things about here is a couple of user paths that are already defined, and you can utilize those, run them. There's also some results associated to those. So here we have a test that was run on this day with some bad results, and a follow-on test that was run with less impact in terms of errors and so on. So you can do some fun things here with your own analysis. But of course, the goal in this demo is to show you net new stuff. So let me start by recording. In this particular recording window, we have the ability here, we'll talk about some of this functionality coming up when we move from a new user path to a modified user path with a second build. You have the ability to, if you're doing mobile, now one of the great parts about NeoLoad is it's mobile enabled, has been for years. This mobile technology is built into the tool, so there's no extra protocols needed, no things that you need to focus on. You can actually record directly from your mobile device right into NeoLoad. You do that by clicking off the Start Client. The Start Client essentially means that you're going to launch a browser in this case. We also have some pretty slick features in here, one of them being the ability to identify something or emulate something that you don't have. So for instance, if you have a mobile web version of your app and you want to record that as though you're coming from a mobile device and you don't happen to have that mobile device, very easy with this tool. You just click this identify option, click the picker tool, which we'll see throughout NeoLoad. So it's a very easy tool or button to use to go ahead and pick different things. And this has a bunch of OS browsers, or in this case mobile devices. So maybe I want to go against iPhone 5S, and you can say OK here and it will substitute the traffic. So from a server's perspective, it will know it's coming from an iPhone 5S. And you can do this on record or on playback. I tend to do it on playback, to be honest with you. So here we're going to go ahead and start the recording. A couple of things I talked about, newer technologies and some of the latest things that NeoLoad supports. One of those, of course, is the ability to manage and work with HTTP2. This is a fairly new type of protocol that's out there, changing from HTTP1 over to HTTP2, and the speed difference is astronomical. So many of the large companies are starting to switch over to HTTP2, and we're already enabled for that technology and be able to handle it. So we're always keeping up with the newer things that are coming out. So let's go ahead and start up Internet Explorer, and we'll get into the actual recording. So what happens here is NeoLoad brings up the real browser. There's no mock browsers. It brings up this recording window. Okay, so this recording window, a couple of things of note. You have the mode that we're in now. You have pause. You can stop the recording. You also have this field in here called transactions. Okay, this particular one is very interesting. It's not required, but it essentially is what other platforms call timers. We use folders. So if I wanted to organize my user path recording into something that's relative to maybe a use case, I can type in here the name of the function that I want to do. I would click on it, and all of that traffic will go into that folder. So it's a great organizational tool, as well as the ability to do several steps in a transaction folder and have that come out as an aggregated response. So you can kind of control how you want to look at the data. So best practices, we tell people to use it. It's not required. I'm going to go ahead and use it here. So the first thing I want to do is type in the first step. Okay, but as you can see, when you start evaluating NeoLoad, NeoLoad wants to have the ability to not only pick up straight HTTP traffic, but HTTPS traffic. We do that by embedding a NeoLoad certificate into the trusted root section of the browsers, whether that's Chrome, Firefox, or Internet Explorer. What comes up when you first launch NeoLoad, and if you have not installed the certificate in it, is this particular little window here that wants you to go ahead and install it. We have this great automatic feature where it will just load that cert and then you're good to go. Or if you'd like to download it, you can download it maybe to your desktop and then load it manually. It totally depends on you. So what we're going to do here is install it. Now, what does that cert do? Again, if I am recording an application and I switch from HTTP over to HTTPS, if I don't have that certificate in there, what happens is the server is going to try to communicate back through NeoLoad, and if it's not secure, you're not going to get HTTPS traffic. So your recording is only going to be half of what you expect. Okay, so definitely if you see this, load it in and your eval will go much smoothly. So here I'm just going to go ahead and start the installation, and as quick as that goes, we have the certificate loaded into our browser. Now in IE and Chrome, if I load this once, of course they both share the same option, so that would handle both IE and Chrome. Firefox, you would have to do it the same way, but you'd have to do that individually on those particular browsers. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to go and utilize that mode of these transactions or containers or folders, however you want to call them. Here I'm going to go and come to the home page of what I'm going to test. Now we talked about the two different builds. I'm actually going to test or record the weather app version 1 and then show you how seamless and easy it is once you've modified this recording to go to another build either that day or the next week, depending on your life cycle. So here I'll just go ahead and I'll open up this particular application. Now, behind the scenes, what's happening is NeoLoad is creating the recording or user path. And I can look at that here, and it's not going to affect my recording if I want to move off of that screen. I can come in here and look to see what's being created. Okay, and we'll talk about this right after we're done with the recording. So I want to go back to that browser, and I want to go through a simple workflow here. So I'm going to submit a report, add a weather alert maybe to the Boston area, and we'll be good to go. So next thing I want to do is enter the next step that I'm going to click on. Okay, so I'll go ahead and submit a report here, and you can see the little folder appear behind the scenes here in NeoLoad. And I'm going to enter some data. Okay, so I have some required fields here. I'm just going to go ahead, and I already have some pre-filled stuff. This will save me from typing, and it can be the king of laziness here. So for me, typing can be somewhat painful, so I'm going to use whatever I can. So here we're going to say a fire in the Blue Hills of Boston, let's say, as a description. Correct that one. We're going to put that as maybe a category 1, so it's pretty critical, and I'm going to put this against the Boston area. Now the flow is to click the submit button. Okay, but remember that from a transaction standpoint, I don't want to put it all in this submit a report. I want to create a separate container here or transaction called submit. And you can see that appear here, and we're good to go. If we want to come back to the home, maybe I'll just say back, and we can see that the report has been generated here. Okay, but I really don't see much on this screen. Okay, the next build that we have of this app is going to show a lot more details, a lot more functionality. We'll have the option to review reports, and also there's a contact sheet. Okay, so what I'm going to do is close the browser. This will kill off any particular threads that are open and stop the recording. What comes up next is what we call the post-recording wizard. Now there's a lot of wizards in the tool, again bringing home that faster, more automated ease of use to help guide you through certain sections. You certainly could move through any of this manually, but the goal here is to cut back on the amount of time so that you can do more tasks. Here it's pulled up any of the servers that were caught while I was recording. Now the key here is, of course, I only want one of the servers that is my main server, and others might have been located either on my browser, or in my case I tend to have Skype running most of the time, or maybe I have Outlook. Okay, we have the ability here in a single click to clean up our recording. So I have extra stuff in my recording. I want to clean it up. So when you get this, just pick the servers that are appropriate for you, and you can click the next button. But there is one more option. Again, there are times where you don't want to have to record this. Maybe it's a third-party plugin, and you don't want to test against it, and you never do. You can add all of those unselected to an exclusion list. So next time you record, it won't show up. Here I'm just going to clean up my recording and get to the next step. So step 2 talks about a couple of different things. The first are called framework parameters. Okay, what are these? These are libraries that are built into NeoLoad. So things like .NET, some other applications, Oracle Forms, that have pretty extensive values that you need to parameterize. For instance, .NET has view states and event states. We have that pre-built into NeoLoad. So just the matter of clicking next, it would pick up that you use .NET. It would tell you, do you want to parameterize, and it would do all of the work for you. Okay. I actually like these because you can create your own. Working with a gentleman a couple of days ago, Oracle Forms, very heavy in the amount of parameters. Took about a half an hour to an hour to parameterize one of his scripts. His comment to me was, geez, do I have to do that every time I record? My response back to him is, of course not. And we created a framework for everything we did. In the matter of seconds, all he has to do is click next, and all of that work is done. So frameworks are very powerful for the tool. The second option here is what we call, or most places call, correlation. This is searching out and seeing if anything has changed between when you recorded and when it plays back. In my case, this is a simple PHP app, so I really don't have any frameworks, nor do I have any dynamic parameters. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip this step, click next, and finish. Okay. So what I would recommend when you go through that post-recording wizard is to try those two options first. If you receive nothing back from NeoLoad, go ahead and skip it until you create your own frameworks. Then you can go through and utilize that. And that'll be a different topic we'll talk about possibly in another demo. So what do we have? Well, we have our user path. I really didn't call it anything. I can change it up here. So maybe it's build 1, let's say, and we have kind of a tree structure in NeoLoad. So again, no scripting involved. We can easily look to see what we did in each of these. So one of the things we did, of course, is submit a form. And I can look here and see the screenshot of what we did. At the same time, I can come in deeper. So this is the page level. These are the transactions we created. Of course, all of this can be renamed. And then within there is this submit. This submit was a multi-form post. NeoLoad did all this work for us. So it took the HTTP request and converted it into a multi-form post. So now we can easily edit this and manipulate some of the data in here. Now, first what I tend to do is after a recording, I'll come in and I'll actually check it. Okay, this is kind of a debugging mode. So we have a check virtual user icon. This actually is our debugging tool. It's the only other window that'll come up. You click start check, and what's going to happen is NeoLoad's going to run those requests back towards the server and get the response back and then do a comparison. Okay, and we'll see whether things work or not. Now, this is again not required, but best practices is when you do a recording, and even if you manipulate it, you should always do a check virtual user, because if you have an error here with one virtual user, you can imagine how many you'll get if you have 1,000 virtual users. So definitely use this check virtual user. Here we can see we have an issue. This again is broken up into that nice ease of use, very similar to the controller, where we can come in and I can see where that error occurs. Here I can see I have a redirect error. I can look at a bunch of different things within here, but I also can see we have a difference column here. This is telling me that the request above it, okay, had a difference of 100%, which means that the higher this percentage, the more likelihood something has changed, which of course made this one not work, right? So I would need to go in and figure out what has changed, and we can look at the request responses. We can do compares side by side. Now I know this app very well, and I know that this app has a token in it, and we can see this is an authentication token. If I want to go back to look at that within the design, I can simply go back and I can see here's this token. Now I've hard-coded the token when we did the record. The server of course wants to pass it a new token every time a new session comes in. So I need to handle this to be able to say whatever the server passes me, go for it, right? Well, how do we do extractions in this tool? Okay, very easily. We can do it several different ways. The first way, which is a breeze, is the ability to just double click, say, you know what, I want to extract this value and have it as a parameter that will be handled. I can say use extraction, click automatic. Bingo, done. NeoLoad's created the regular expression. It's pulled that from the response. Here's the value. I say OK, and I'm done. Next time I run this, I'll have no issues. Now there's other data within here, okay, that possibly I want to change out. Things like latitude, longitude. Maybe it's a user ID and password and you have a big file of those, or you're going to pull them from a SQL file. Here I'm going to pull them, these values, from a CSV file. Well, how do I do that? Well, within NeoLoad, we have the ability to create variables. We do that with this little button up here called the Variable Manager. I have one that's already created. Here you can see that I just loaded a CSV into NeoLoad. You can even put column headings into your CSV and just move that up to this first row, however you want to do it. What I like about the tool is the ability to have many different ways to push data around in your recordings. Here's the file, the type that we use, and you would just load the file. We also can pull, and this is the one I like actually, pull from your SQL tables, whether all of the major databases are covered here. You can simply create a query. From that query, it builds a table in memory so that you can pull from that table, no different than you're pulling from a CSV file. So very slick to be able to use that one. So here I'm just going to go ahead and start substituting my data. Okay, remember the name of this variable is called fill cities. So here to do it, again, is very easy in this tool. I just simply double click again. Now I'm not going to extract it. I'm going to push a variable through. Okay, I use this picker tool. Again, we saw this earlier. You're going to see this throughout the tool. Ease of use is the key here. So I'm going to replace out the latitude so I can see the name of the variable and the name of the column. You just simply double click, say OK, and I'm done. Okay, I'll do that for longitude. The goal here is I want to make this recording as variabilized as I can so that I can run it and constantly be pushing data in. No different than if you're using user IDs and passwords and so on. So here's the country. We'll do that one. And then the last one I want to do is location, because this is the actual city. So I really want to mix this up. So we'll say city here. So now I've actually created my recording. I've manipulated my recording. You can see how fast that is done. Now, maybe I want to modify my recording and say I want to submit a report a couple of times. Okay, well, we have these actions down here where normally you'd have to code in code-oriented tools. Here it's click and drag. So let's say I want to add a loop, and I want to put that loop right about here. Okay, and I want to submit a report and submit within this loop. So all I have to do is drag them up or use any of these function keys. And now I have that in here, and possibly I want to run this maybe twice. Okay, and you can just deem how you want to run this. So now I have a logical action in here, and again you can see how easy it was to click that in. Since NeoLoad's written in Java, we support, of course, JavaScript. So at any point in time, should you want to even customize this further, you could utilize one of the JavaScript options here and drag that up into the recording. We have some code here that you can use. We have a full library in our documentation, and it's vanilla flavor JavaScript. So I usually find myself Googling and sticking it in here, making a few changes. Okay, so again, that click and drag. What I'm going to do is I'll eliminate anything that's in here, so that way it won't error on us. I'll apply it and we're good to go. So I've created some more stuff in here than normal. Okay, I want to check it, make sure it works, so that we get a good build here to test and add to our system testing when we're doing it. So again, this is just going to go through. It's going to add 2 loops. Okay, and we can see all of the data that's been created or pushed. We can see I created one here, actually 2 records against China. Okay, and so on. So again, we can easily see what we've done. We can come back here, okay, and let's assume at this point this was a build that we tested last week, and now we have a new build. that they've given us, and there's some changes to that build. So for instance, if we look at the next build, we can see that this version of the weather app, okay, they've completely updated. Okay, it will have, not sure why that's taking a little longer, but what we'll have is the actual version that's different map, different categories. We now have this contact us, we have the ability to view reports. So here's where a lot of issues come with other tools, is having the ability to take the stuff we already did and have a maintenance aspect of it. Okay, and maintenance is the biggest hit against the development of your recordings and keeping them up with certainly an agile mode. What we've done in this tool is we've created something called the user path update. Okay, it's pretty slick. It's the ability to then modify this recording for the new features that come in the next build. And we're going to do that right now. To do that, we just hit the record again. And instead of recording a new one here, I'm going to base it off of the one we just did. Okay, so I'll continue to launch this. And again, here you shouldn't see that certificate if you loaded it first. If you see it, please load it. And I'm going to go up against the next build. But some of the things that's happened here in this little recording window is you can see that these transactions are pre-filled. This is being pulled from the list of transactions that came from the first recording we did. And if I pull this drop down, you can see it's all the ones that we did. So again, I don't have to type, which is great for me. So again, this also deals with speed, because I want to go as fast as I can. So here, home, I want to go ahead and launch that weather app. We'll launch the second version of this app. Okay, and you can see that it's starting to create another recording here. Now I want to go through the flow like we did before. Okay, and then I'm going to add some of the new features. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, and we have this little click tool, so you can either select from the drop down or click the next thing in that list. And here I'm just going to go through that same type of function, and we'll go same thing. So we'll say another fire. It's definitely a dry season in Boston. Lots of fires. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, I'll click some of these features here. So all of my required fields are filled in, and I want to submit. Remember, I'm going to change this transaction to the submit, and I just click it. Okay, now last thing I want to do is I want to add some of the new features that weren't there in the other build, and it's as easy as just continuing to go. Now I can either type in the new stuff here, or again, maybe I just want to pull from a list of transactions. We have the ability here to actually push in a file, like a text file, so that possibly in the beginning, you know there's a new build coming, you know a bunch of fields that you're going to be, or buttons that you're going to click on, and you don't want to have to type them. You could just create that text file here. I have mine for the new version, so I can load that in. I'll say okay. Now you'll see that these have new ones in this drop down, so I didn't actually have to type it. I can just add it from a text file. So one of those is opening a report. Okay, so here I'm just going to go to our reports in our weather app. I'm also going to view that report, so we'll click on that, and here's the report. Last thing is we have this ability to use the contact sheet, which we didn't have before. So I have contact here, and we'll just load that, and that's it. Last thing I maybe want to do is go back if I wanted to, but in this case I'm pretty good here. So again, I'm just going to close the browser, let it stop. We'll bring up that same post recording wizard. I really don't want this server to be in there, so I'm going to clean it up. Okay, if I had any frameworks that I created or any particular tokens, I could search these, but if you do it once, again, if you don't find anything, just go ahead and skip this step. Now we get into the real fun stuff. Okay, it's actually creating the new recording based off the old one. What's the goal here? Well, the goal is why reinvent the wheel, right? If I don't have to do all of the work I've done in the old from the old script and do it in the new one, okay, I want NeoLoad to do that for me. Okay, so it's a matter of seconds that it will do it. So here I can see any of the stuff that's been added or substituted. Okay, I can view the original to see maybe what it's going to get rid of. Remember, we didn't do back here, so it's going to get rid of that. And I can now say next, I'm good with that. And what NeoLoad has done is it's gone ahead and created a new one, okay, but it stamped the old one, so it never deletes the old one. And we can see how many elements were deleted, how many were inserted. So if I say finish at this point, we could see there's the old builds recording, here's the new one. Now remember, the old one had loop in it, it had a JavaScript in it. You can see in the new one, it's taken all that we did from the old one and applied it to this new one. So here we have the loop, we have that JavaScript. Within here we have the submit that we did, and all of that work that we did in the previous one has now been done here. So in terms of maintenance, this is a huge time saver because now we don't have to go back and do any of that work. But at the same time, you can see it's added all of the new functionality into this particular recording. So this is the user path update. This is a very slick addition to NeoLoad, where now we have the ability to really keep up with that agile process and save a ton of time on having to recreate any of the new stuff and redo all of that work again. All right, so now that we have our recording in place for this new build, a couple of things we want to do is move through the rest of the design process. One of that is the ability to, which I mentioned earlier in terms of some of that test realism. NeoLoad has the ability to kind of work with things like network virtualization, pushing things against, let's say, real devices like we saw on recording. We can do that on playback. Changing up the behavior of what you recorded and making it realistic. Okay, so for instance, we have this next tab called populations. Okay, now if you're using the sample project, you'll see that some of these have already been created, where I'm kind of theming this out to test for larger cities. Possibly they have faster speeds than the small cities. Okay, now in our case, if I want to create one of these based on the recording we did, I just go ahead and I can create a new one. So we'll call this demo. And in that demo, I can then drop in that recording we just did. Okay, this is where it gets pretty slick. I kind of wish I had this tool years ago, not having to have a different browser or OS loaded on every single VM. Here, all I need to do is say, all right, this is recorded in Internet Explorer, but maybe my traffic or most of my people are coming from something other than Internet Explorer. Maybe they're coming from the Mac Chrome. Okay, I can go ahead and again, this is going to substitute. Here you can see we could take advantage of that HTTP2 as well. And this is where our network virtualization comes into play. Again, built into NeoLoad, ready to go. Here I could just click it. I could say, you know what? I want to have these people coming from maybe a WiMAX. Okay. We also can change the signal strength for any of these mobile ones. We can come in and say, maybe it's about average. And all of the upload, downloads, packet loss, all of this is industry standard, but you can change this to mimic any server that you would want to mimic. Of course, latency being the biggest one, certainly from a mobile standpoint. So I'll say OK here, and we're good to go. And I can keep mixing this traffic up. Right? This is required, and it's required because we want to make sure that you're mixing your traffic up correctly, or you could keep the default. But again, giving that realistic flavor to how your users are coming into the system. Another great feature with NeoLoad, and you'll probably hear me say that a lot, is the ability to map to your infrastructure directly through NeoLoad and have your data that's represented either in real time while you're running or in your results reflective of not only your round trip times, your response times, but also what was going on from the machines themselves. Okay, now we do this with what we call agentless monitors. What that means is we use SSH or Telnet to get to those servers. You don't need to have anything installed on those servers, so you're not taking valuable resources, you're not fighting with other groups. You simply click the new monitored machine, and then you can go ahead, enter the host or IP address, and as you can see, we can do OS, network, database, or web EJB tier servers, and there are a ton of them. And each one has industry standard counters that you can pull from. Right? Now, in my case, I've mapped a few here, so you'll see that when you load the sample project, you are mapping to an Apache server on this particular node, and on this one, another Apache server. So I'm actually looking at two different Apache servers on two nodes. Okay, so within here, of course, is everything I want to monitor. So these are the different counters, and some of these have little lines under them. That just means that we have thresholds that are predefined. So number of busy workers. Here I can look at the thresholds. These were predefined based on industry standards, but of course you can add your own, and you can add them to any of these counters. It's completely up to you. So another slick piece here within NeoLoad that you definitely want to take advantage of. So now that I'm done creating, I want to run it. So this is where we move off to the next module. This is the Runtime module. Okay, so once we've checked it, made sure it works, added monitors if we want to do that, mix up our populations, we kind of come into the Runtime component. This is where you're able to mix up and push your traffic against possibly different things. So we mentioned a little bit about the cloud in terms of that we have a built-in Neotis cloud platform with this tool, and you could do kind of a hybrid approach. Many of our customers do either one or the other or both at the same time. This tool gives you that flexibility to do that. So for instance, I've created a scenario here. You'll see this in the sample project again, and this is mapped to two of the populations. Okay, if I want to map it to the one I did, I just click it, and that will be mapped to that one as well. Okay, in my case though, I'm just going to show you these two. Okay, so what we do here is we have the ability to pick our duration. How long do we want to run it, or how do we want to run it in terms of length of time? Then how are we going to push the virtual users into the system? Okay, we have constant, which is really good for stress testing, ramp up, which is the most common, peaks and valleys. This is really good for garbage collection testing, and then we actually even have a custom one where you can create your own graph. Right? So in my case, I have two populations, one going against big cities, one going against small cities. Now, in terms of the architecture, what happens with NeoLoad is it pushes all of the traffic from this controller to what are called load generators. Right? These are just agents that sit on however you want to deploy. In my case, or when you install NeoLoad, you'll get one on localhost. This is good for certainly your eval for 50 users that it comes with. You can use it against a localhost. Anything more than 50 to 100 and up, you want to use this sparingly. Possibly put it on another machine, get it off the machine that is on with the controller. But this is great for your eval purposes. You can also see that I've mapped to some cloud infrastructure here as well. We can do this very easily within NeoLoad. So what's happening, back up just a little bit, is that once NeoLoad passes the information to the load generators are actually going to do all the work, pushing the traffic to the servers and then back to the load generator and into NeoLoad here in the controller to look at real-time stats. Okay. Now I want to be a little more realistic with my load. I want to test this maybe against some other locations around the globe. Here, big cities, I'm looking at Tokyo and London for this particular run here. And at the same time, I can have multiple populations running. For small cities, okay, I'm going to have another one, but you can see for big cities I have a different type of policy that's going to happen. Here I have 2 minutes, constant. So I have 50 users constant against big cities, and then small cities, okay, I'm running for 16 minutes with a ramp up. Every user every 15 seconds for a total of 64 users. Just be careful with the amount of users. If you're in your eval, it can only reach 50. Okay, other than that, it's based on your license. And you can see here I also picked different generators. So I'm going against my local host and a couple of other cloud ones. How did I get the cloud? Well, it's built into the tool. Okay, here in our cloud console, you have the ability to pick different sessions. This is the one I'm currently using right now. If I want to add new generators to this, we can do it one of two ways. We can click this plus button. You will get a user ID and password, and then it's up to how you have in your eval. You could talk to your sales rep in terms of evaluating maybe the cloud. When you become a customer, it's based on cloud credits, and or there's a new option here in NeoLoad for virtual users per hour. So it's a pay as you go type of technology. Here I would just click next. We have emailing put into this, and then I'm good to go. So this is on demand, which means I'm going to load these instances right now. And you can see we have many different locations around the globe and many vendors for the locations. So maybe you want to just use Amazon, maybe it's Microsoft, maybe it's SoftLayer, Google, Rackspace, you name it, it's in here. Okay, so that you can test against different providers as well as different locations. Right? So we certainly could show you more on the cloud. Just contact your sales rep. We'll set up a demo for that as well. The next thing with NeoLoad is, okay, I'm ready to roll, right? So I just can hit the play button, or I can work in debug mode. Play is the best. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this. Actually, I'll launch the demo one, since this is the one that I can put less load against. Okay, and also with the sample project, you have, like I said, all of those results. So here I want to just go ahead and run it. We can name it whatever we want. In runtime, this is real time. So it's going to boot up. It's going to substantiate those load generators. I'm just using the local host right now. It's also, you have the ability to look at this in terms of users versus errors, response times versus requests, or graphing. Now, graphing is pretty endless in this tool, which is awesome. You have a bunch of templates you can use that are predefined. You can create your own custom templates should you want to, or you just maybe want to look at how things are going here, and I can just drag on, okay, in the loop, what's going on with submit, and I can just drag that onto a graph, and I'm good to go. And this will constantly fill out as we're rolling here. You can look at any errors that might occur during the test, any alerts. Okay, these are based off of either the server alerts, which you created in your monitors, or even better, built into the tool is the whole notion of SLAs, or service level agreements. Here, there's a button up here for service level agreements where you can create what you want in terms of your load times. Possibly you've gotten that from the business side where it says anything greater than 3 seconds is unacceptable, that type of thing. And it uses SLAs as a wizard. So again, very easy to create, very easy to manipulate. The second or last tab, I should say, that's pretty important here is the ability to see everything running, what users are doing what. Also, you can add load during the test, take away load during the test. You can stop troublesome users, but you can also watch them as well. So I could click follow. It will, you'll have the ability to see them in that check virtual user and see what they're actually doing. Okay, but the real payback of the tool, of course, is coming in the results. So we'll let this one go, and we'll come into our results section. So the first one was the first test that is here for you in the sample project. The first tab that comes up is the summary tab. This gives you a complete, actually our test is done. I'm going to go ahead and load it, but I'm going to come back to the one that has a lot more data in it. So So here you have our summary, this results summary, you have your graphs here, lots of stats going on here. You can look at your hotspots, what were the highest pages. If you're using Microsoft SQL, you would actually see the highest SQL commands that were causing issues. So all of that is in here. I could look at the cloud. This is very graphical. I could say, all right, I was launching a test, and based on this test, these color codes mean obviously green is good, red is not so good, black is neutral. So here in London, I was getting times, of about 2.34 seconds. In Switzerland, it looks like we were a little slower. Actually, this is in Italy. I'm about 12.5% slower in Italy. So we definitely have some slowness in different geographical regions. So many of this are SLAs, like we talked about earlier, in terms of how long do these pages run and how do they look in terms of meeting our SLAs. So all that's in this summary tab, but really the power comes in these two tabs, values and graphs. Values is all of your raw data. Okay, so here I can easily look on all my raw data, whether it's in this format or possibly even the tree structure here. And I want to see, well, in creating my browser in terms of this particular use case, how long did it take to submit that report? Okay, and that's buried in here. So I can easily look at this and see over time how long did that take. And I'm looking at average duration. You can add more things to this graph. And we're seeing the raw data here. Okay, we have different average percentages. We have standard deviations. All of that is in here. My favorite though is the graphing side. So if I come into the graphs, I have some predefined ones. These are here in the sample project as well. But possibly I want to create my own. So you can create a new tab here, and let's use some templates. So maybe I want requests versus errors up here. I can blow that up. And maybe on that I want to dump in throughput. Okay, and I can see throughput through the life cycle of this test, right? And many things in here. Okay. You can zoom in on this section. You can look at each and every data point. But possibly in this case, we had some issues with our test. Okay, we can see that certainly from the test summary. If we look at this summary, we had some issues. We can look at our requests. Our response times are just all over the place up here. Okay, so there's some issues. We can look at that from a graphing standpoint and say, all right, we have our hits and our errors here. Maybe I want to look at this in terms of some of the user path data. So maybe I want elements per second, which is essentially hits per second. So maybe I want to look at all my pages in terms of that goes. But the real key here is trying to get down to that kind of root cause analysis. As you can see here in some of these other tabs, we're looking at some SLAs on there. We also are looking at what's going on from a server's perspective. And as you can see here in this graph, we can also see it in the monitors tab. There was some issues with my Apache servers. Okay, and I can see that here. I can even drag that up to a graph. I can look in even closer, and I can see that I maxed out on my thread pooling. Okay, so I need to add some more thread pooling to my Apache server for this test to run successfully. Right? So graphing, manipulating, looking at analysis is great. Any of the errors that might have occurred, okay, this whole section turns into essentially like that check virtual user. Any alerts here, these are the SLA alerts, or if I want to look at server alerts, they're in here as well. So all of this stuff is here. A couple of last notions here about the graphs is some of the overlays you can do with the graphs. So for instance, here I'm testing, let's say, against my iPhone, and I only want to look at those results. Okay, and I also want to look at that maybe based on higher speeds. Okay, so here I'm going ahead and I'm looking at maybe submit report from the iPhone using, actually that's elements per second. I'm just going to switch this to average response times. And I can see here the timing. So if I zoom in on this section, now this is with higher speeds. Now I'm going to change this to slower speeds. And I want to see the difference between the two overlaid. Okay, actually I think I had it reversed. Blue is big cities, small is slow cities. So again, you can see the major differences here between the speeds and how that was impacted on the test. A great tool to really get some value add out of your analysis section. Okay. Two last things. The first is maybe I want to do kind of a trend in here. We have this compare with section. This allows you to compare two different runs. So you remember that in these, certainly in the sample report, we had a bad run and then we cleaned it up. They made some server changes and we had a good run. So possibly I want to compare those two side by side. We click compare. This will run a series of new graphs. It doesn't eliminate any of the others. It creates a comparison report. So here we'll be able to see, certainly from a summary standpoint, what's going on between the two. There's a fair amount of data in here. That's why it takes a little bit to load the results. But what we'll see here is in the test summary, we'll see test A versus test B, and then we'll see the delta between. What is the change? Well, we did better in terms of a 23% increase in times and so on. Okay, and you can see that in your values tab, you can see that in your graphs tab, you name it. All right, so all of that is here for you in a comparison. The last thing I might want to do is create a report. Maybe I want to push this out to some teams. I can come in here, I can generate a report. This report here, that's the comparison, but maybe I just want a standard report off the good one, and I click next. I can pick and choose what I want in that report. Okay, and I can pick and choose the style of report. Maybe I want to put this up on a web server, so maybe HTML, and you can customize everything, fonts, logos, footers, you name it. I would click next, and then it would create the HTML, or in this case, if I do PDF, and so on. So very powerful, very slick tool, very easy to use. Again, no scripting involved, all click and drag. So again, hitting back to that faster, more automated, keeping up with agile technologies, a lot of supporting all of the new technologies like we saw with HTTP2, but there's a lot more than that. And that unmatched realism with the network virtualization and how we can mix up our traffic. That concludes our demo. Thank you for watching this. Take care.